So, I wanted to talk a little bit today about your story. And, if you're sharing any element of your story in your book, which I highly recommend that you do, you don't want to just be sharing information. The way your reader will be able to receive any information you are sharing with them or any insight most powerfully is if you combine that with sharing your story and creating connection in that way. But something that can come up is we kind of get a bit bored with our own stories. And then we start to think, hang on, is anyone really going to want to read this? Is anyone really going to be interested in what I have to share, like talking about my own life, my own experiences? This comes up a lot, and it can come up at any stage of the process. And it can actually show up, once our books are out there and we are talking about them in different ways, we can start to get a bit tired and bored of talking about our own stories. And I just want you to know that that's natural. The reason we get bored with them is because we've lived them. We've lived our stories. And if it's something you're writing about in your book, it's probably something that you've revisited a number of times in the past. And we can get to the point where it's like, actually, I don't know if there's much juice in this. So, the first thing to recognize is that this is normal, that it's natural. It doesn't mean, oh my goodness, I shouldn't tell my story. It doesn't mean no one's going to be interested. It's just that you have already lived it. It's very familiar to you. And, it's a positive sign because it means that you've fully integrated your story, you've processed it. So go you for doing that. There is still a huge amount of value in sharing your story, but how can you bring it alive for yourself? How can you reconnect to your own story so that when you're sharing it, you feel really passionate about it rather than a bit flat? This is a question that came up in the Unbound Writing Mastermind recently, and it was interesting because that very day, when we had a coaching call, and someone said, I'm just getting a bit tired of telling my own story. I had been interviewed for a podcast, and I was talking about kind of when I changed direction in my life, which is a story that I've shared many, many times in lots of different ways. And to be honest, I get a bit bored with telling, it's like, does anyone really want to hear this? But this was a podcast for a new audience. And actually, even if it's an existing audience, people love hearing your stories. They will take something different from it every time. So, this is something that had come up for me, and it was something that was coming up within the group. So I have some thoughts about how you can kind of reconnect with your own story. And like I said, bring it alive a bit more. The first thing I recommend that you do is when you're writing about your story, really have that sense that you are kind of almost sitting over the kitchen table from your reader, and be thinking about not just kind of telling the story, but what you want them to take from the experience of hearing your story. What are the lessons that you learned from this experience? What are the themes that you want to bring through? What is your intention for sharing your story? Really connect to that. And as you're writing about it, you can talk to the reader as you're writing it. You don't just have to kind of write the story and hope that they're going to take whatever it is you want them to take from it. You can be asking them questions. You can be saying, like, have you ever experienced anything like this? Or you can say, like, looking back on this now, I realized that this was a turning point, and I learned to trust myself even more deeply. So you're reflecting on your story as you're writing about it. It's not just this flat exercise of just, here's my story. You are putting it into some context from where you are now. That's going to be really powerful for your reader, and it's going to be really powerful for you as you're writing it, because you're going to be reflecting more deeply on what you learned from this experience, and also what your intention is for your reader. It's really important to be connected to your intention when you're writing. And sometimes we can forget that. So that's the first thing. The second thing I always recommend, this is a key part of the Unbound writing process, is to be sharing elements of your writing and your story as you are working on your book. So the reason for this is there are different layers to it. I mean, one, it builds interest in your book. It lets people know that you're writing. You can take them behind the scenes of your process, which people always love to do. They're really fascinated by. It starts to create interest in your book. But also, when we are sharing elements of our writing and elements of our story as we go, it becomes this gorgeous dynamic process, because you start to kind of notice what people's responses are. You get feedback, people ask questions, you notice what people are particularly interested in. It can reignite your passion for your own story again. So rather than it being this experience that you've lived through and you've revisited many times, it's like, I'm a bit over that now. You get to see it from your audience's perspective. And it's like, oh, okay. Wow, the story I was talking about where I changed direction kind of in my mid-30s in my life. I shared the story where I was going into the office. I was working in finance. I'd been working in finance for many years, and I'd got to a point where I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life, but I knew I didn't want to do that. And I share the story where I'm going into the office every day and just feeling dead inside, and kind of going out into the park at every lunchtime and just sitting on a park bench eating my lunch and asking the question, what can I do with my life? Until I had my light bulb moment and I received this intuitive kind of hit to retrain as a coach and a hypnotherapist. Now, that story hasn't got much of a spark for me now. Because, I've told it so many times before. But when I share it with you, when I share it on a podcast, or I share it in kind of a social media post or something, and somebody new gets to see it, who maybe is in that situation at the moment, and they're like, oh my goodness, thank you so much. I really needed to hear that today. It reignites my passion for that story. Okay, it lights something up within me, and it feels much more dynamic and engaging because I'm inviting that engagement. So rather than waiting until your book is out there, particularly if you are in this place of, oh, will anyone want to read what I have to share? When we're in that place, it can be like a natural response is to not share anything because it's like, oh no, what will people think? The more powerful thing to do, the most powerful thing you can do, is to actually share, because I can guarantee as soon as you do, you're going to start to receive a response which will tell you that yes, there are people out there who are just waiting to hear your story. So one, your story, it may be boring to you, it's not boring to anyone else. Two, as you're writing it, be putting it into context and reflecting on it from where you are now and inviting your reader into that process, like you're having a conversation with them. And three, share elements of your story as you go. Don't wait until the book is out there. Start sharing and allow it to be this gorgeous dynamic process. I hope you found that helpful. I would love to hear from you, kind of what resonates with you, what your main takeaway is from this. And if you are feeling the call to share your story and write a book right now, and you'd like to find out how I can support you with that, you can comment below or send me a message and we can arrange a time to have a chat, because every time a magical being like you shares their story, the world shifts. It really does. It's so important. So I'll see you again soon. And here's to sharing your unique magic with the world. Bye.